data aggregation and analysis. I introduced Joel White earlier. For those that are new coming to this session, he's the product and strategy owner at Bosch. He came all the way in from Germany the other day just for this event. So video as sensor solutions, Joel will speak to you about managing camera generated metadata. He will be downstairs at the Bosch booths as well. So please join me in welcoming Joel White.
All right, thank you. If you caught my session earlier, we talked about analytics and what they can do. This is even a little more on the cutting edge for what we're doing, because we know cameras can generate comprehensive data. Now it's a question of what might you do to pull that data into something useful to end users and customers. Now, we have an approach that, in all truth, anybody can tap the data stream of the camera using tools we provide. Most people aren't interested in doing that. They're looking at data as a service solution. So we're working on, and I've been on the data journey for 3+ years, what I'll do is give you a look at what we're doing, where we are in the system we have that's now in beta test, and explain the differences of how we got where we are and what the differences are. So I think the one point I do want to make, there's actually a few. Cameras are always going to stream data at 15 frames a second, and the data stream is everything in that field of view. Now, if you're looking at what I'll call task-based, where I'll set up an analytic and it's going to detect a person crossing a line, that's a task. There's data for that, but it doesn't have to be task-based to get data, because the cameras always stream it. And then in my world, and I did say I focus completely on intelligent infrastructure for traffic operations, meaning the roadways and proper use of the roadways. Accurate data is high-value data. We could collect data, and I can show you examples of cameras that have been installed for 2+ years. The data on those cameras is coming out the exact same way. It's just not as accurate as what I talked about earlier. So when you take your data model from a, let's call it at best 80% accuracy level to 95 and above, the value of that data becomes, it's a game-changing thing. It's extremely valuable when it's accurate. Inaccurate data from the customers I work with in traffic, not so valuable. Interesting, but am I going to change my traffic signal timing based on assumptions, or am I going to do it on accurate data? And a great example I look at in New York City, and I lived there for a good number of years. There are some intersections that at rush hour prioritize pedestrians in all 4 directions. Now, I mean, if you think about that, New York City DOT must have looked at a lot of data to understand how much impact is there to stop all the traffic and let pedestrians cross. So in pedestrian priority is a big deal, and in New York City, stopping traffic can cause gridlock and other things, but they did it, and they did it based on data. So that's why I say high-value data. Now, there's different types of data services, right? And what we took was an iterative approach. And I mentioned it earlier to the gentleman, I don't know your name. We have a very good customer in Ohio. They happened to win the Smart City Challenge in federal dollars. And when I first went down the path with him, knowing we could collect data, and I asked him, what data are you interested in? His answer was one word: everything. And then I said, of course, I need some business-related information. How long do you want to store it for? One word: forever. So then I took it upon myself to say, let's use what tools we have and go down the path with this customer and experiment with data. And I'll give you a look at that journey, and I'll show you where we are today. So this is that roadway in Ohio. It happens to be that customer's. And we're running detection on if the traffic queue is here, we raise an alert. But these little red vehicles are triggering counters. So generally people say data, they want to know how many cars went northbound in the left lane, and that would be lane 1, lane 2, lane 3. How many went southbound, right? And then, then you go how many cars versus trucks, and slice and dice it any way you like. That's data. So what did we do for him? We implemented a tool, and I'll show you this live because it's still live. It's in its probably 5th iteration of how it works. This happens to be, the implementation is his cameras sit in his environment. They spit out task-based data into an Azure instance. We stand up and then we develop a Power BI dashboard for it. Now when I say task-based, an important nuance, if you understand Bosch cameras, this is well, I want to stress this because the new system has nothing to do with tasks. If I define a task here, and this happens to be the camera on US 33 mile marker, whatever, eastbound entry ramp counts for trucks. That is a task sitting in the analytics engine on the camera. If I define all these tasks, I have data for those items. If I don't define a task, that data doesn't exist. So the camera may see it all, but the back end in this implementation, and we used a tool that was never finished, a prototype tool, it relies on camera tasks. Again, so a lot of work. You got to define all these things just to get the data. So we don't have to do that anymore. Now there are other things going on in here. We can go on in the details. So this happens to be the new camera, and looking at how it can detect, and some people ask me about bad weather and other things, so I like to show this, and there's a live video of this sequence. But the data out of these cameras, I said, were 95% plus accurate. This is the new system. What the new system does is it ingests all of the data. I don't care about tasks anymore. So instead of the camera sitting there task-based giving me bits of trigger data that I can then report, this camera reports everything. So we collect and ingest all of the data, and then a dashboard is just a way to visualize, right? Whether you like my dashboard or hate my dashboard, that's not the question. The question is, in order for me to relay the concept of camera in the infrastructure can transmit data and that data has value, I've got to show you some data somehow. So a dashboard's the tool. Now, is that the way you might want to look at the data, or your customers might want to? Maybe some. So there's more to data than just providing a dashboard. And that's the other important piece. System has to be flexible. And how do we do that? So for me, the foundation of anything is accuracy. So accuracy of detection creates high value. High value in data, high value in real-time trigger solutions. And valuable data is where I focus. So we've got lots of cameras out there. Again, it's the deep learning and the neural networks where I focus. So here's how the system works. You've got this camera, and it could be either of these, and you'll see the portfolio continue to grow and show new capabilities. But you have this camera sitting in the infrastructure, and today what we do is we also have this cloud-based system called Remote Portal. Now, I can tell you I've had many hours of discussions with end users about connecting their precious cameras into an infrastructure they don't own, right? Data risk. And I'm trying to think of, what was the big data breach a couple of years ago where the government got hacked with? There you go. So it happened to be like 3 weeks after that where we're talking to We say, we want you to connect your cameras into this little thing called remote portal. And the answer was, no way, no how, never. The edict is, you will not connect a public system of a publicly funded device into an infrastructure you do not own. So we had some deep discussions with their data security experts, and they looked all around. And at the end of the day, it wasn't a security risk that they were worried about. They were worried about their device was in my environment, even though the account is theirs and they control it, where we as the owners of the environment could touch their device without them knowing it. Now, they crossed that bridge and they did it. We have many cameras in the system, but the value of the portal is twofold. So the challenge on the Bosch side is to say, is there enough value to get you across that bridge of data security? And it's a health monitoring system, it's a maintenance system. You can get a quick look on hundreds of cameras to say, are my cameras up to date? Do they need firmware updates? And if they do, you can hit a button in the portal and it'll comb through all your devices and do those updates for you. So if a device goes offline, it can send you notifications. So it's a health monitoring system, but at the same time, it's our entry point to get from the camera to this. That's how we get the data. Now, from a security standpoint, it's not like the cloud's reaching to the camera and saying, I'm going to get your data. It's all initiated on the camera side through embedded technology in the camera to negotiate that handshake. So eventually they got comfortable with the whole idea of connecting into, let's call it a back end they don't own. So we talked about this. I don't need to cover this again, but the data side's what we care about. So here's how it works. You've got your camera in your environment down here doing all the things it does, including streaming data and events. All we care about is the anonymous data coming out. So if you connect into Portal and do this, we now can tap the data. And when I say data, I'm not talking video. It's there, but we don't need the video. We use video to measure ground truth and prove the accuracy. What I'm talking about is that anonymous data stream and getting all of that data into our interface. So here's a peek at how it works, and I'll show this for real in the system live. So if you think about a camera in the infrastructure, and this is a video. Let's see if I can get it to play. There you go. So video is looking at a specific angle, and we'll call this an approach. Now, we have a method to perspective correct a typical field of view as if you were looking at it from overhead. So now you see your data moving across what is a simulated overhead view. Now think about 4 cameras in this intersection. We can do that with all 4, and we effectively drop it into a Google Maps view, and now we have a seamless data map of the entire intersection and can now extract out data based on that map. That's the premise of how this system works. And of course, on our side, there's getting from this to that is a calibration and setup task we do. And I'll show it to you. And that gets us data. Now, I said dashboard was just one way. The real way most people I deal with want to get access to data is through the API. Right? All the data we collect sits in a repository, and you can tap that repository real time using an API. And some of our users want to export and import into Excel and other things. That's fine. Not a path I would take, but that's the traditional path in traffic. So dashboards are a good fit. Export, API. The point is when we collect data, it's the end user's data, it's not our data. Of course we use it, but the end user owns the data, he owns the device. However he wants to tap the data and use it, it's really up to him. So in that early model I showed with that Power BI dashboard, we collect all that data in our Azure, which is the old way we did it. And once a day, all that data gets dumped into the DOT cloud. And they have their own use cases where they're combining video data with weather data, pavement sensor data, all types of, when he said, I want all the data, he meant all of the sensors I deploy, not just video. And now, when you think about what we do, it's great to see how many pedestrians crossed the road in the crosswalk, how many didn't use the crosswalk, how many got caught in the crosswalk when the signal changed. So we can ingest external data sources and now look at video data together with, on red, what was the situation, whether it's vehicles, pedestrians. So there's lots of ways for us to do it, and also going through the API, there's lots of ways for our partners to do it. And that's the goal for us is, we don't know what the answer is. I'll be the first to admit that. We know one thing, data is important. Our end users want the data. How they want it, which data they want, all of those questions, and from a business perspective, what's the value of the data and data as a service, we're figuring those answers out. If you said to me, what does it cost today? I can tell you how we've put a price on it in certain cases, but is that the cost? Is that the value? We have some user experience experts trying to investigate that and understand. So in my system today, and it's this camera going through that process to generate this data, and this is how the back-end calibration looks. And I'll show this because those cameras come into the back end, and when I say we have all the data, how do we get it from the camera into this dashboard? It's forensic, right? So if you think of forensic search on recorded video, this is forensic search on data. So when I referred back to that task-based solution on that highway, let's just say a car went from the northbound lane across the grass in the median to the southbound lane, and they happen to see that and they go, gee, did that ever happen before, and how often does that happen? There's no task in the camera to know that, but the data's there in the system like this because we have everything. We simply extract that out forensically and say, in that grass median, how many vehicles crossed there, put a time frame on it, and pull the data out. It all exists. And that's the advantage of ingesting the entire stream versus a task-based stream. If you didn't think about it when you created the task, you have nothing until you create the task. If the camera saw it and I ingest all of that data exists and is ready to be pulled on the fly forensically. Now, you'll talk about latency and other things. Today, our system is about 5 to 6 minutes latency from happening on the camera, pushed to the cloud, onto the dashboard. We can shorten that to maybe a minute or two. It's a matter of performance, and it's more a matter of requirements. Why would you need it that fast? If you need data quickly, you set up a real-time event on the camera and you execute real-time because it's milliseconds. Delay and latency, it's a discussion that shouldn't come into the data side. So there's operational data for real-time versus what I say is historical repository, which is where we're focused today. So here's a look. This happens to be in Vail, Colorado. And we've got, there's a camera here. You think about that data map. We've mapped those camera views into a map. This happens to be a pole in this roundabout. I think it sits right here. What they want to do is they want to know when a car enters here, where in this roundabout does he exit? And it might be in the field of view of 2 cameras down the stream. So we have another thing called MultiCamera Tracking. So we can look at behavior on camera 1 and then pick that up on camera 2. Now, we're just about done with that, and if we can do 2, we can do 3, and we can do 4. So we can then say, whenever anybody enters, where did they go in this roundabout? That's what's of interest to them, because then they know how many people exit. In Vail, it's a big highway segmenting the resort side and the, I'll call it the business and infrastructure side. They want to know which way is my traffic going? To the ski hill, or are they going, to the McDonald's on the other side of the road? So that's the value to them. Now, are they there yet? Our project with them is tied to a smart lighting project. So when they put in the lighting, they'll have the infrastructure. And right now, we're just piloting and testing with them in numerous places, not only here, but for smart parking and other things. So when I talked about forensic, now we have this map. We're looking overhead, and they were very interested in pedestrians using the crosswalk. So we just draw zones in the crosswalk, and we extract out that data. They wanted to know jaywalking, so we draw zones in everything that isn't the crosswalk. Now we have jaywalking. They wanted to know how many cars block this bus-only lane. Easy to get. We just draw the data out. What they did find out, because we can heat map all of this, is when you look at the pedestrian movement, there's a little fence here they put. So bus comes here, ski hill's on our side of the road. They drop off. They want people to use the crosswalk. Go figure. So they're well behaved coming that way, but coming from the hill, and maybe they're tired, they go right to the back of the bus. And the Vail guys go, maybe we need to put in some active measures to direct those peds and do something different. But that's the value of data, right? It gives you a picture of your environment, how it's being used, and maybe how you're going to, manipulate it later to improve something that could be a safety issue or security issue if you're in a different world. It's data. You just have to understand what you want to pull and how it's going to drive that value. So I'm going to switch because as long as I have an internet connection, I will show you some live data. All right, so I said we had this data, we don't want that window, in Ohio. That's my original Power BI data, and all task-based, right? Now I can come in here, I can change my date range, I can look at, a different camera, and I can pull out data, right? And the data will update. I can, zoom in and only look at certain segments of data. It's a flexible platform to tap data, but limited in that respect. The new system, and these are, let me make sure, I'll show that after. So this happens to be one of those Intiox cameras deployed at an intersection at Carl and Moore Street, City of Columbus. And we're looking at everything. So from a heat map perspective, we're heat mapping vehicle speed. So when you look at speeds, the closer you are to red means the slower your traffic is. So here you can see in this westbound lane at this time of day, they get more congestion. Speed and congestion data, heat mapping is a little more relative on the highway side, which I can show you as well. But the main point is, and we're in beta. And these tasks here, that's my engineering team tinkering. They continue to work with this. These are the tasks we put in to generate these dashboards. Now, if I just wanted to look at pedestrian data, I simply switch to what's called VRU classes and then move up here. And now there's my peds and bicycles for that timeline. And in traffic, it's either hourly or in 15-minute time blocks, and we can slice and dice however we might want to. The main thing is it's a flexible interface to get at data. And it can get complicated, right? This is relatively straightforward. And like I said, are we right in the dashboard? It's our interpretation of what data might look like. And that's all it is. But all of this data sits there, and the DOT can tap it real time, however they like. And this intersection usually gets about 40,000 vehicles a day, so it's certainly busy. We're only looking, we're looking eastbound and westbound. But I'll show you another one, and I have quite a few. We run one in Ohio called I-670 Smart Lane. And I'm not 100% sure how many cameras there are on this lane, but these are older cameras, right? Now, their cameras are all tagged with location. Now, if I want to look at this camera at mile marker 9.4, lane by lane westbound. And I just click on those zones, and there's my data. It'll take a sec. Now, being in beta, we're not optimized to deliver the data quickly yet, so that'll improve. But you can see here, as we merge towards the red color, those times of day in lane 1 and lane 2, traffic is flowing slower. And so the main point is we can draw data out of a camera, we can aggregate it, we can collect it, and it's available in who knows how. I mean, we don't know. We just know that data is there, data is useful, and it's useful in traffic all the time, but it's useful in many other cases as well. I do want to show one other thing. So for that intersection we were looking at, this is what the back-end system looks like. We take that camera and we lay it in, and that's the field of view simulated in that overhead view. So now we know where the camera sees, and the blue zones we draw are those forensic data extraction methods, how we pull the data out and pop it into the dashboard. We could pull anything. So that's how we do it.
It's just the metadata that you're keeping, right? Not video, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, anonymous metadata is too expensive to store video. Anything else?
Oh, yeah.
All right.
And you mentioned the users may know what they want to do with the data, but from your experience, and I won't hold you to it, but what percentage of your customers have a clue about what they want to do with the data? Or is it just, they're still just...
So I'll answer with my own perspective, which I always like to share. I think data is addictive, right? If I give you this, you're going to say, well, can you do that? And it just goes on and on and on. And I'm not sure that we know what data they want, how they want it, and where we're headed.
Seeing that they know what they want.
I'm going to tell you they don't know, because the conversation I had was with my lead, and I said, you know, what data? And his answer was everything. I mean, he wants everything. Whether or not he will actually use everything, who knows? You know, and how he's going to use it. He has a team. This happens to be he has a team, and they're called the. They work on specific use cases to extract information out of data from everything, right? We've been working with them for 2 years. Could they tell us exactly what they're doing and what they want? No, they invent it as they go. So I think we'll learn. What we do know is data is important, and just a question of how do you provide it.
And you say that it takes 5 minutes to process the forensic data in its entirety. Is that done on the edge or in the cloud? Or?
Well, in order for us to push the data through the system to the dashboard, our latency is 5 minutes. Now, I will say, we take the data from the camera and we do run some algorithms on it to enhance, right? Because, if you look at a camera and an object appears in the frame and it says, and this especially with the older analytics, it'll come in and it'll say, it's a car, it's a truck. No, I think it's a car. No, it's a truck. And it'll oscillate. Under the covers, there's actually an assurance percentage that says it's a car, and I'm 50% sure I'm right. And then it'll keep changing that percentage. Now, what we do when we say something's a car, we look at it from the time it enters the frame till the time it leaves, and we run an algorithm across its trajectory to then create, and I'm never say 100%, the highest possible assurance that if it's a car, it is a car. The assurance number is in the metadata. Yeah, it's in the metadata. Now, we don't expose it, but it's there, and we use it behind the scenes under the covers.
Like the user can.
You could if you just tap the data stream.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like I said, the data stream from the camera, we're an open system. We provide the tools. We have other companies that If you don't want to put your cameras in this system, you could create your own. I mean, there's nothing stopping anybody from tapping the data stream the same way we do. And we provide the tools. We have some counterparts that build MQTT little resources to help get on that path. There are lots of things out there to really understand how to tap the cameras if you want to do it independent of what we can offer. A lot of people, we're offering it to people who don't want to go the hard route. They just want to get the data we can provide, tap the API, get into the repository. Now, anything's possible. The camera's, like I said, open.
And you have an example of the jaywalk area and the crosswalk
Yeah.
area. Can those be run simultaneously? Or
Oh yeah, it all runs simultaneously. Yep. I mean, what we do is we draw those zones and pull the data. It's just a matter, so think of forensic search. You say this zone is jaywalkers, this zone is crosswalkers, and it all comes out into this long list, right? You just say, I want to look at jaywalkers on this camera, and in my implementation, you'd click that field and that's what you'd see.
Okay. And then the final question is, you may or may not have an answer, is Bosch, have you decided to aggressively develop these higher level analytics to take the burden off of the individual different traffic engineers to
Yeah, I don't know if we're taking the burden off of anybody. We might be adding more.
But I mean, as opposed to relying on third parties, or you're looking to kind of
You know, so this service here, if I go to market, my dealer can sell the service. We're not a direct company. It's an enhancement to what we offer through our product value chain, right? So we may have dealers who want to offer it and maintain it for their customers, help educate them on understanding how to use it. Now, I will tell you that this stuff, I don't think that an end user at a DOT wants to get down to this level and calibrate these data extraction zones. But at the dealer level, sure, right? You can offer this as a service, and if your customer comes to you and says, well, gee, I really want to know what's going on over here or somewhere else, can you get me that data? As a service, you say, sure.
your value added research.
Exactly. We create the environment that creates the opportunity. Thanks for your time. Hope it was worthwhile.